was conscious of the debilitating effect of emigration when I arrived in Glencolumbkille in 1952 from London, where I had met the flower of our youth as emigrants. Glencolumbkille was dying, and the killer disease was emigration. When I settled in as curate in 1952, the marriage rate hardly ever exceeded 4 or 5 marriages per annum. A fierce resolve gripped my mind. Perhaps I was influenced by the Atlantic cliffs that surrounded me, or by the traditional nationalism in which I was nurtured. I decided to develop self-help here, which would arouse other communities across the land. I expected our governments to fulfill their responsibilities to create opportunities, but I was realist enough to know that we were at the end of the queue in Donegal. In one of our first meetings, I listed what I then considered to be the 5 curses of Glencolumbkille. No jobs, no electricity, no public water supply, no dispensary, and bad roads. There was method in my madness, because if the accomplishment of a project depends on voluntary labour, then it must be short, snappy, and efficient. Otherwise it becomes a burden and a drag. A pioneer in any endeavour ploughs a lonely furrow. The voices of critics in high places engendered within me a stubbornness, but the love of country and the love of God sustained me. I wrote a trenchant letter to the Minister of Social Welfare to take local men off the dole to work putting up the ESB poles. It was well for me that my action was never known, because my popularity would have plummeted. When the work was completed and I was determined that people would be made aware that they had taken a great step forward, I arranged for the ESB to have the electricity switched on after dark, so that every house and every street light in the glen would be simultaneously illuminated. One politician stood out in my mind, Eamon de Valera. I decided to write to him in 1953. Ahara, I am well aware that you are burdened with national affairs, but I am also aware that as head of government you have influence and authority far above that of government agencies, to whom we have appealed again and again to no avail. This fear Gaeltacht is dying rapidly, and nothing can save it except an enormous and immediate effort by the government. Constructive suggestions, provision of good roads, speedy erection of mart for weaving factory, revival of homespun industry, fish curing station, flax industry. I was afraid that he would not get my letter, so I took the precaution of sending a copy to his wife as well. The result was quite startling. Within months, Glencolumbkille's first factory, the mart, was set up. As I conducted de Valera round, he said, if only all of rural Ireland could see this, then all would be well. Down the years, I have fought a running battle with bureaucrats who were never involved at field level. These were people who would stand idly by, secure in their own jobs, and allow decay and neglect to find their own level. This was the time I sprung one of my wild schemes on the parish council, the Central Farm Unit. With a communal farm of 14,000 acres of mountain land and 1,000 acres of lowland, we would be amongst the largest farms in Europe. Around this time I shared a platform at a meeting in the west of Ireland with socialist writer Peadar O'Donnell, who was well known for his controversial views. He turned to me and said, I don't know whether I've moved to the right or the church has moved to the left. £8,000 was raised in Glencolumbkille parish, while meetings of the Donegal Association in the USA and England raised £18,000. There was one local source that was as yet untapped. This was the attraction of our natural surroundings, tourism and heritage. I contacted the archaeologist Michael Herity. Dreams of freedom, of the ability of people to take power into their own hands to build a fully human future, know no boundaries. As Christ said, I was hungry and you gave me to eat. Insofar as you did this to one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did it to me. Quite a number of ideas for creating wealth in the district occurred to me over the years. I was dissuaded from bee farming because though there was plenty of heather, there was little clover. Noting the enormous amount of furze in the glen, I sent off a sample for analysis, but it was said the content was too low for the manufacture of perfume, while the Institute of Industrial Research and Standards advised me that the market was too limited to justify the cost of us making chalk for schools. I would not accept defeat and the redundancy of 50 dedicated staff in the factory. Look, I said to Jarlath, the sea is all around us. Learn all you can about fish processing and marketing it. The Development Association divided responsibility among us for the hotel, the holiday village and knitting factory and folk village. But we were not experienced, and despite expansion and new hotel management, things went badly wrong in 1980. I'll never forget the shame, mystification and hopelessness when the auditor announced in November 1980 that our hotel debt had increased by £99,000. I knew it was the end of the road. I have always been sustained by the motto, better to light one candle than forever curse the darkness. My motto was more radical. Better to light 10 candles even though 9 of them are extinguished.